So I'm Frederick Dunn, and today we're going to do something fun. We're going to walk through a horizontal hive inspection, but first I want to talk a little bit about my apiary, where it's situated, and what I like and don't like about it. So let's get started. This is going to be uncut, straight through, the whole thing. I know, it's amazing. So anyway, what we're doing is giving you the overview here. This is my backyard apiary, which is only about 85 feet from my house. One of the things I like about it, of course, is the location. We have acres and acres of unmanaged farmland here. I've also got my hives spread well apart, and my future plan, of course, is to keep moving these hives farther apart from one another, because that cuts down on drift, disease spread, and lots of problems like that. So in the future, we'll of course spread them even more and set them by landmarks like these grapevines here, or we've got a spruce tree over there, another spruce here, and then of course hive configuration. So ideally, we want nice sunny days. Look at the sky here. We do have blue sky patches. The bees are foraging. It is August the 8th. I don't know if I said that already. So they have a lot of forage right now. They are bringing in resources. We're coming out of a light dearth period. I have 2 cameras today because, again, I'm working alone and I want to see everything from all angles. You may wonder what the environment looks like out here. The goldenrod is coming in. Before I do a hive inspection, I want to look around the outside of the hive. Always check the landing board. I get in close here. These bees are doing extremely well. What's a long Langstroth hive anyway? Well, it's just a horizontal format for the Langstroth frames. So instead of stacking boxes, we just put them one after the other in a horizontal arrangement, and this one is 5 feet long, so we can go over 30 frames. And we look at the landing board here. We've got a lot of venting going on, and that's because the nectar has been coming in consistently. What they've really needed has been a good pollen source, and now we look today, we see that they're bringing in pollen. I see a pollen carrying forager about 15 to 20 loads per minute, so that's pretty good. How often do we inspect these hives? In general, we inspect them within every 21 days. That's my target. The other thing is, before we get into the hive, I look at the landing board, but I also look at the front on the ground. What's going on? Got any bees crawling around? Any problems like that? Another thing I might look at here, get close to that entrance. This has a single entrance. It's a 1/2 inch high and 6 inches long. I have a bunch of guard bees looking at me. Are they at all defensive? We have a semi-overcast day. The weather could go bad at any moment. No, they don't care at all that we're here. That's good news. This hive I built myself, copper flashing, ventilated through the soffit gable ends here. Well, one of the reasons, of course, for a horizontal hive is there's no lifting. When you build it yourself, as I did here, then we know that we can make it to suit our personal needs. So if someone had a hard time lifting boxes, stacking hives, things like that, then they would want a horizontal format, because all we're lifting here are going to be the frames, and this is the hive we're going to inspect. As you can see, it's insulated. Some people ask, Fred, why aren't you painting that? It looks kind of ugly considering the stuff you normally do. Well, since I teach about bees, I like people to see that that's R10 and how the insulation is arranged, so I leave it unpainted, just so you'll know right away. This is held down with clips. So now let's get on with the inspection, because that's the funnest part. The other thing is, how long ago have we looked at this hive? It's been 2 weeks. So I want to talk to you about what we're going to see before we see it. What should we expect this time of year? We're getting into the beginning of a nectar flow. And the last time I inspected, and that was 2 weeks ago, we found eggs here in the first few frames. These are cover boards right now. These are 1/4 sawn red oak boards. They're 1 inch thick. The thickness of this material right here. And they run the full length of it. The other thing I did was, during my last inspection, as I marked with an orange mark here, that's where the last occupied frame was that they were using. So we're right at about 19 frames in here, and we're going to get into that. So the other thing is, I mark these in order to make sure they stay in order, because what the bees do is they propolize all these joints. And I like to fit everything together exactly the way they did before. What if we had to feed the bees? Then I've got this cover here I blew it already because now they're up there and I can't get them off of that. So they're very calm actually. We haven't even smoked them yet, but we're going to get to that. I'm going to leave this up like that for now. Maybe give them a couple light puffs of smoke just to get them going there. Let them know we're coming. In fact, let's come around here, give them some light puffs right at the entrance. Don't overdo it, of course. Bees are not a fan of smoke. Some people think that it makes them prepare to leave the hive, but actually what they do is they seek deep shelter. I have a nice aluminum table here so I can set a hot smoker on it. And now we're just going to go ahead and start pulling up these boards. And where am I going to put them? On the ground? No. Right on the hive stand there. And of course I need to free up my hands, so we're going to mount this camera right here on the tripod. And I'll turn on the other camera. Second camera is going to be used for close-ups or to give you a different angle, but we're not going to cut away during this whole sequence. So camera 2 is running. Let's get going. So you might like to see everything. What beekeeper doesn't? We'll use this camera as a mobile cam to get me close. And I want you to see inside this hive. They're really doing a good job of keeping the bottom clean. And we have vents through the bottom that are 2-inch diameter holes. We have standby equipment here. This is interesting too, so I'll go over that. We have wooden frames, and because these are plastic frames, I break away the corners because the bees can't chew it and make their little travel corridors, their venting corridors. So when I use a heavy wax plastic frame like this, we pre-cut the corners and they're stored here in this empty space. And we've even got some bees here. Look at these loiterers. Maybe they're malingerers, I don't know. But even though the interior has a divider board, it's not snug to the point where bees can't come through. So it is interesting to me that the bees go into that space and then still manage to remain overall inside the main body of the hive. As far as the bees are concerned, this is where the wall of the colony begins, the hive begins. And then because the entrance is over at this end over here, we expect to find more honey and resources stored here. As we get towards the entrance, we'll find more brood and egg activity. So let's get some of these bees out of the way. Again, we're going to do a light smoke in here. And listen to your bees. They're a little annoyed by the smoke, but overall they're very calm. The other thing is, even though this follower board or divider board, whatever you want to call it, it goes all the way to the top here, inside you'll see that there is a space between the bottom interior of these surfaces and the top of the frames that is bee space, so they can travel over the top of each frame and use that to get forward and back there. Breathing some smoke. There's another vent. We have the ability to control those vents from underneath. There's a wheel there. And in the past, the bees have managed to close those up. But what I want to do is set up a stand here so that when we find a frame that's interesting, I'm going to stage it right here. This is homemade, of course, just with a couple pieces of angle iron. The other thing is we're inspecting at just after noon. And that's because we really want the sunlight to be coming straight down. So if we go up here, look straight into the sun, look straight down, we have a pretty good view here, so we'll be able to look into the frames as we pull them up. And I'm only going to pull one frame at a time, and I'll show you that whole process here as we get going. The other thing is, make sure that when you have your hive tools that you use in each hive, clean them between hives. Getting smoked out by my smoker. Make sure they're clean. Sometimes if I have a flat hive tool, I'll just leave it in the hive and then each hive will have its own. Oh look, these guys went down on their own. So now we can put that back. That's handy. So we'll go along and we're going to get the first one up here. This is held with propolis, and propolis is just resin that the bees get from trees and plants, and they use it to glue things up. So what I want you to notice here is how much propolis they put on this, because it's rough cut lumber. So this actually helps provide an antibacterial, a barrier inside that helps them defeat disease inside the hive. So we encourage propolis, and it is nice to see them building that up there. I'll just move this one over. And we come along here, and the first thing we grab is a drone. So let's take a look at this rascal right here. Drones are male bees, very easy to spot. You can see up to 20% of the population in here could be drones. And it also shows that they've got enough resources that they're creating extra mouths to feed. Male bee. Doesn't really contribute anything to the colony. They just, that's a reproductive resource for the bees in case they need a new queen. They're not going to mate with anybody from this hive. Of course, the drones will fly out and continue the genetics of this colony. You have to be careful when you're reaching under these two. There could be bees on the surface. You could put your fingers right on it, and that's when you're going to get stung. But again, one of the things we document when we're inspecting is the disposition of the bees. And these are very calm, so don't have to lay that on the ground. We're going to put it right there on the table. So the other thing, we look at the resources. The last time they were inspected, as I mentioned, was a couple of weeks ago. Little history on this hive is that they were a package that we got in the beginning of the year, back in April, I believe. And they were Saskatraz bees, but they quickly superseded that queen. Now we got a lot of propolis holding that in place. So I'm going to pull up this divider board so you can see what that looks like. This is also very thick stock. It has propolis all along the bottom. There is a copper screen down there that I thought would be great for venting. So if I built another one of these, I would not repeat the copper screen. Instead, I would let the board, of course, go all the way to the bottom. So it's 1.5 inches thick. It has a cherry cover piece, actually. And then, of course, we just glued this on the back. And this allows us to expand the colony or contract the colony depending on how much space they actually need. And because we're in the beginnings of a nectar flow, it's not going to be long before we're going to actually be expanding this. So I'm looking at how they're using the frame and the resources that they have already in place. Hive tool in here. The other thing is, because I have these cover boards in place, I leave them there until I get to that part of the frame. So what we have here is the foundation. It's heavy wax, but the bees are not working it yet. We have a couple of really light areas here that look like new wax. They might be trying to do that, but what we have here is just unemployed workers inside. Of course, we have another drone right there. If you want to practice picking up bees, grab the drones every chance you get. Young drones don't fly yet. The other thing is, when we're putting these frames back, we like to put them back the way they come out. So I've marked each frame. This is frame number 18. And that way I make sure that if I'm flipping it around to look at the cells on a drawn out frame, that I'll be able to put it back exactly the way it came out. So they really have glued these in here. So that's another thing that you might want to document, is that the bees that you have, when they superseded, of course, we got a queen that flew out, mated, came back, so we don't necessarily know those genetics. So these frames, again, they're just starting to work the wax. We can get closer on that. These light areas here on this nice black plastic foundation, that's just new wax that's being worked by the bees. And listen to how quiet they are, how calm they are. But we added these because we're expecting this, of course, onset of a new nectar flow here, which is going to be goldenrod primarily. And I'm going to switch hive tools here. It's going to be goldenrod and asters. And the other thing is, when we start to pull these frames out, we make sure to pull them to the side before lifting. Because as we get to the populated hives, as we get to the populated frames, we don't want to take a chance that the queen could be in between these two surfaces. And if you pull it straight up without pulling it sideways, you risk rolling and injuring the queen, of course, and we're going to look for her as we go. But that's just something to be aware of. In fact, let me elevate that camera so we can look down on this from two different angles and switch back and forth. Now when I say this is uncut, it means that we're doing this inspection in one continuous take. So now we've got a couple of angles here, and I want you to be able to see up close what's going on here. So at July 1st, I marked this frame here, and that was the end of the hive as far as the frames that they were using. So we're going to pick this one up. And the first thing we notice is how heavy it is. So when this is full of honey, and this is full of honey right now, even though we're going to see some differences in the frame, this is a foundationless frame. So what that means is when we put this frame in here, there was nothing, no foundation. I don't even use starter strips. I just make use of bee space and I put it in there. But if you notice, it's only connected on the side here a little bit. It is not connected very well on the bottom. So if you pull this up on a hot day like today, you might be wondering, how hot is it right now? Well, it's 82 degrees and it's supposed to hit 88. But what we have here, if you tipped it, it would start to sag and lean out because it's unsupported. But I want you to notice the large cells here. So we're going to get close. So the cells that you're seeing here lower left, those are drone cells. See how fat they are. These are drone cells also. They're a little bit cinnamon colored and they're not full, but right next to them you see the worker cells. So it's easy for you to tell the differences in size when they're right next to each other like that. And then of course lower right here we have capped honey. So everything looks healthy so far. We do want to be paying attention to the bees' overall condition. We know the disposition. They are laid back, easygoing bees. What's going on the other side of this frame? Whoa. Capped honey. So again, this is all comb they built themselves, so it was the bees that decided to make drone comb there. You may be wondering, why isn't there a queen excluder here? And that's because I don't care where they lay eggs, where they develop brood. This is not a hive intended for honey production. If it was, you might consider a queen excluder of some kind. But for me, for my purposes, I don't need one. And if you were going to harvest honey from this hive, then all you would have to do is observe the frames and make sure that you're going to pull up a frame that has just honey and no brood on it, and then you could harvest that. But remember, this is a young colony. They superseded the queen. I found the new queen and marked her, so she's marked with a dot. With any luck, we're going to find her today. So I'm going to park this one over here. Lets them feel more secure under there. Let's get this other cover board off. I like to hear the sound of the propolis gluing things down. And again, it's because this is a rough cut. They've worked that up and they keep adding to that as they go. Put those over there. Now, even though we don't expect to find the queen this far over, I'm not going to take chances, of course, and just assume that she's not there. We're going to look, and again, this is one of those new frames, new wax. Good population here, by the way, so I'm confident that things are going well. You should be looking at the workers too to see if there's anything like deformed wing virus. See if they look nice and dry, healthy. Then that way you know that we may not be dealing with some kind of disease. This is a very heavy frame, so this is a deep frame, and it does have foundation, so when it's fully capped you can expect one of these to weigh, you can see all the nectar in it. So I'm going to get a close-up of that. You can expect it to weigh about 7 pounds when it's full. So if we look at all this, this is a honey frame for sure. And it's just full of nice glistening, some capped, some not. And I noticed they didn't work it all the way to the ends there, but there's nectar that is yet unfinished. And when it gets finished, when they've dehydrated that down far enough, that's when you get the capping. Some people wonder when they look at the wax capping here, why is it different colors? How come it's really white in some areas and kind of dark in others? Well, it's been my observation that that really has just to do with how thick the wax is that they put on it. So we're going to put that one right back in there. Notice they're totally workable, and this is a semi-overcast day. We've got some weather dynamics going on. And the bees are nice and quiet. Listen to them. So they seem very content. Now that I've said that, of course, watch them act up. And what I did was, the reason some of these are loaded with resources and some are not, is because we added these in and I color coded them. The yellow ones are the most recent. They've only been in for 2 weeks. So they've got room to expand. No reason to really see the queen here. So I keep this gap going. So the queen, you know, if she's around here at all, she would be heading that way. But I expect to see her when we come to a brood area. I recommend that you inspect your hives at least once every 3 weeks. Good time to get in there. You might be wondering, what about varroa counts? Do you have any varroa mite problems here? There are varroa mites in this colony. Here's another nectar storage frame. So this is going to be a honey frame and nothing else. Let's get another close look at that. Might as well show you everything. So this is loaded with nectar. They'll be finishing this off very fast. And we have, of course, some is capped, but this is going to be just a straight honey frame. So during our last varroa check, and I try to do that again every 3 to 4 weeks before the big nectar flow comes in, because if you had to treat, you might want to treat before you get into a big honey flow, nectar flow, whatever you want to call it. And so we have 3 out of 300 bees. We had a 3% varroa count. And so the bees have done really well. And this particular colony has had no treatments this year. And it was just started this year, so we don't know its wintering capability yet. But if we had to treat, of course, if it's in a broodless period, we would use oxalic acid vaporization as my choice, and that's what we did in the wintertime. End of November, beginning of December last year, the colonies that had varroa mites, we treated them with oxalic acid vaporization at that point, and this year had great success in knocking the varroa mites down. So they've been very slow to start, but then again, remember, they superseded their queen, so we had a natural brood break. So again, the varroa mites lost their reproductive edge here because they need brood to reproduce. And again, we don't even know what kind of queen this is because she is derived from the Saskatraz queen that was here. And then, of course, when she went out and mated, she mates with bees of unknown origin, unknown genetics. So now we're into a brood frame here, and I like to look close to see if I see eggs or open larvae. And so we've got a variety of things on the same frame here. So I'll show you this, not a terribly impressive brood pattern. In fact, let me flip my screen so I can see while I'm talking. So what we're looking at here is cinnamon colored caps there, that is brood. When you're looking at brood, of course, we want to be mindful of its overall appearance and make sure that it's not sunken or greasy looking or that you don't get some kind of off odor. There is brood disease in our area now in the next state over, New York, so we have to be aware of American foul brood. And it may smell, and sometimes it doesn't. Now here comes the sun, right on cue, just so we can look into these cells. But what's absent from this frame, no eggs. No eggs, no larvae. So the queen It is my educated guess that she is not there, so we're going to move this along. Pull another hive cover here. Always mindful not to stick your fingers over. The only time I get stung doing inspections like this is when I grab a bee or she, I squash one. So moving slow and steady is really just the key here. Keeps the bees calm. If you notice, we haven't had to follow up with any other smoke. If you did notice guard bees at the top when you pass your hand over, and if they're looking at you and following your hand, light smoke would get them to take cover again down below. Pull this frame up. Now this one is interesting too. There is no open larvae, but we have capped brood, and it gives me a chance to show you something else about this. We have great capped brood on this side. So I do need to watch for the queen. I also need to be careful because this is again a foundationless frame, but it's so lightweight that I'm comfortable, and you can flip it on its vertical axis to look at things. You want the sun over your shoulders to look down in those cells. Break out your magnifying glass if you want to. But looking at this one, again, I don't have evidence of the queen being active here, but what I have is a great opportunity to educate you based on what we're looking at. Notice the difference in these capped brood. On the right, look how proud those cells are, how much they stick out, and look at the diameter of the open cells here compared to the cells over here on the left. These are worker cells, worker brood, drone cells, drone brood. And of course, right on cue, there's a drone right there making its way around, and it's nice and fuzzy and soft looking. That is a newly hatched drone, and when they first come out, they're not ready to fly and mate yet. They have to mature, just like other bees do when they first come out. And then of course in the upper right there, we've got some capped honey. We're going to move right along here because I'm queen hunting. And of course I want to see evidence of the queen. Other than capped brood, have I seen any evidence of the queen yet? I really have not. Here's a nice drone here again, goofing off. We've not seen evidence of the queen. And of course we checkerboarded, so here's another frame that they're working on. But the good news on this frame is I can show you yet something else, and that is new comb that they're working, drawing off of that foundation. But look what they're storing here. All of this here is pollen. So they've got the pollen stored in those cells. That means we're getting closer to the brood frames because I expect to find lots of pollen next to the main brood frame area, because of course, just like us, they want a pantry right near the nursery. So we could be getting close. Hope I find it, hope I'm not running out of time. I'm trying to do this whole thing in under 45 minutes, start to finish. So let's get this one up, nice light frame, more brood. Nothing going on here. Now look what happened. See when I tip this? See how the frame tips out? See how the wax tips? Like that. Be very careful of these foundationless frames. But it's great for brood. Again, we're going to show you real quick. Capped brood. Open cells. More capped brood. Now those patterns are not awesome, but guess what's been happening? They've been hatching out. Look at the pattern here. Solid brood, one after another, and they're also storing nectar right in among it there. So let's put that one back. And on the flip side, lots more brood. I see a queen cup there, which is along the bottom edge. I don't really want to tip it up, but if I go on the vertical axis, of course, I can look in there. And they're queen cups because they look like the beginnings of a queen cell, but they are empty. So that's for future use for the bees. If they decide to make a queen, no reason to smush those cups. They are not threatening anything. Let's get this cover board off. Watch for bees, don't smush them. Now we're getting close to where the queen was, because guess what's right here? The entrance. So they tend to concentrate their brood near the entrance where ventilation is best. And this is also where I found the queen the last time. Lots of pollen, some capped brood. Unimpressed. If my queen left, I will not be happy at all. But the good news is, if she did leave, what would I do? Well, I have those resource nucleus colonies that I showed you at the beginning of this video. I would go and pull a frame with the queen, but here we have a bunch of pollen stored right there, empty cells, and some capped brood, tiny bit, no open, no larvae, no eggs. Let's get checking. Now remember too, we're coming out of a period of dearth. So a couple of weeks ago, she was laying eggs like crazy. Now I do have some bees flying around here a little bit now. So I want to just give a couple of cursory puffs. We're getting to the nerve center here. We're getting where I expect to find the most brood. So don't forget your smoker. Keep that going every now and again. So we're up here. Now one of the other colonies a couple of weeks ago I was looking at, and there was a queen piping right then. So let's look around. Now we're in. See? Eggs. Now this is great. We have eggs. Now because we have eggs and open larvae here, good chance the queen's around. So let's do a flip turn here really quick. Remember, the last queen was marked with a white dot, but don't bank on that. You can lose your queen, or she can be superseded from time to time, so still look for a queen. But I can at least show you this. I think I'm going to go to this camera over here because it's angled better for the sun. But we have larvae of all ages. So let's get a close look here. Put my fingers on this just right. We have pollen here, and then we get down here, and what do we have? Right next to the pantry where all the pollen's being stored, we have larvae, all ages. And let me find the eggs here. We have eggs right there in the center. So I'm hoping that is showing up on this camera. So we have little C-shaped larvae. Now one of the things that we need to look for once we see that there's larvae that's hatched, what kind of food resources are put around them? Ooh, I've got little eggs in there too. So there's eggs in these cells. I was concerned about the lighting here. And the other thing is, because it's in the 80s, it's a great time to be looking at brood, because we're not risking chilling the brood. And notice, if it were a cooler day, the bees would be all over it, keeping it warm. So we have capped pupa there. And I'm just going to do this really slow because I want to make sure it comes through that there are eggs and larvae. And of course, loads of pollen. We need a lot of pollen to feed the bees, and it looks like they're in good shape. I also don't notice, again, any signs of brood issues. It's also feeling warmer over here, even though it's in the 80s. What's the temperature that we expect to find over the brood itself? So 94 to 97, so even on a day like today, you'll feel some heat rising there. Get this one up. I'm gonna find that queen. Ooh, lots of, loaded with larvae here. So this is another great one to show. All stages. Let's get up here. And again, though, we've got a foundationless frame. Larvae, all ages. And then what you do is you follow along and you look at the smaller ones and the smaller ones, and that's where you're going to see the eggs right next to them. So we have evidence the queen's around. And there's a queen cup right there. Right there's a queen cup. We don't care about that one bit. It's empty. And here we have eggs. These cells right here have the eggs in them. And we got to keep an eye out for that queen though. So my problem is I can't see the screen to know that I've got the eggs documented well, but they are present. Let me see if I can find a bunch of them together. And of course, put these back exactly the way you took them out. Now we're going to pull this last cover board off. I mean, we don't have to find the queen at this point. We know that we've got eggs. We know that we've got larvae at every stage of development. So we know that they're increasing, so the queen must be laying. And by seeing eggs, we know that she's been laying within the last 3 days. And this is really glued up. And I've got one angry bee. So let's give a couple of puffs over here. And the other thing is, you don't always have to puff the bees. You can just puff yourself a little bit. But we don't want anybody to ruin what's been a perfect inspection experience so far. Pull this up. Look at that brood pattern. Awesome. So again, the reason that the brood is really collected off to the side there, and I'm going to keep this frame over the hive just in case the queen's on it. I don't want her to drop off. But we're looking at very good brood here. Look at this one. That is excellent. A full frame of brood. So we're looking at roughly 3,000 capped pupa that are going to be hatching out, and they will become the workforce just in time for this big nectar flow that we're headed into. And this center field here, the reason this is open is these are recent hatches, of course. And then we would expect to find new eggs in here. Where is that pesky queen? There are eggs right here. So there again, I am going to take a chance. Try to show these eggs. There are eggs right in the center frame there. And one of the things that helps us spot those eggs is this black foundation. Tiny, tiny grains of rice, but look at the continuous brood here. Yep, there's an egg right in this cell, just beyond my thumbnail. Look in that cell right there, and you'll see an egg. Anyway, fabulous. Look at all this. Really healthy, good looking brood. No sign of the queen other than, of course, her handiwork, which I'm very impressed by at this point. Because when the goldenrod comes in strong, these will all be hatching out. They'll be doing their thing. Eggs being laid here. Foundationless frame again that we have to be careful with, so move it on its axis like this. And we have a lot of drone as well. Remember, that's not necessarily a bad thing because we want those genetics. We have lots of open larvae here again. I would say she's doing great. This is the frame that the queen was hanging out on the last time. And let's get my last frame out, last chance to spot the queen. You can miss her, even if they're marked. I like to get eyes on her. Got some nice pollen on this bee here. The pollen they bring in and scratch off right into the frame. So there's the queen right here. I'm taking her out. There she is, marked white dot, super healthy. I am happy with her. She's laid back. and just tell her that she's doing a great job. I think she's just fantastic. And where was she? The very last frame. I don't want to miss that, just in case that camera lets me down. Let me come over to this other camera, get a close look. Some queens will actually lay right on camera. They just keep working. She's a very easygoing queen. And we're going to get her right back in there. Now we're going to button up the hive and finish up our inspection. So that's it. We got them. We got the queen. We have healthy brood. We have no deformed wing virus. We have varroa mites at a low number. And we have a calm disposition in this hive, in this colony. So they're just good bees all the way around. And be very careful at the end here not to get excited and smush any bees. And remember that there is a, what was I going to say? I numbered these so that they would fit. There you go. And I like to push these cover boards up nice and snug. And they're numbered so that I can remember what's going on here. Cover board number 3. You can blow them. They don't like that as much. They seem to like the smoke better than my breath, which I find insulting. I mean, you'd rather have pine smoke. And I'm going to show you how to get these bees off here at the end before closing things up. Number 4. This is number 5. Let's see what that is. That's number 4. This is your chance to clean things up a little bit. Even the cover boards I try to keep in the same order. Remember, this is my feeding hole if I ever need to do that. And I look at these, they're still hanging out on that feeding. Sometimes there are nurse bees. Nurse bees will stay on surfaces and not fly on their own, so they have to be in direct contact with surfaces for them to find their way home. That's why sometimes we lean these boards on the front of the hive in direct contact again so that they can climb right up in there. And try not to bump or bang anything when we're closing everything back up here. Number 7. I have to say that based on today's inspection, I don't think they hate us. I think that these bees are perfectly content to be here. And I didn't have to use my rack today, so we can get that off of here. Get yourself down in there. And I suspect those are nurse bees because they didn't want to fly at all. And I just annoyed them with my breath to get them back in there. Finish buttoning this all up. And we didn't have to use the extra frames that we have here, but they are present, so the next inspection, if we find out that they are taking on too much nectar, they need more space for brood, we can easily expand them. Now before we close anything up, what do we have here? We've got bees on top, so we can smoke them off of there, but sometimes they're nurse bees. And they're stubborn, so they don't like to go anywhere. So this is where I use my vacuum cleaner. This is a very low pressure, low suction vacuum cleaner. I can get all these bees and we get them right in there. And then this lets us close things up. But if you notice, they're right here inside this container and they're not injured. Of course, we don't put them in the sunshine, but that lets me get them off of the cover boards so I can close things up without smashing a single bee. And that's the inspection right there.